He stared at the fresh earth, a familiar ache tightening his chest. Another year, another hat. A brand new Stetson, sitting squarely on his father's grave, mocking him. Who did this? And why? It wasn't his mother. He knew that much. A cold knot of frustration twisted in his gut. This year, no matter what, he'd find out. He'd wait. He'd watch. The desert night was long, but so was his patience. He just had to know. The dust on the Longhorn Trail had been John's rhythm for years, a steady, predictable beat that grounded him in the vastness of West Texas. Every sunrise found him in the saddle, the scent of horse and leather a familiar comfort. Every sunset by a crackling mesquite fire, the endless sky his roof. His ranch, a modest spread nestled in the shadow of the Chizos Mountains near Big Bend, was more than just land. It was his sanctuary, a testament to his father's relentless hard work and his own stubborn grit. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Or what was left of theirs. Today, though, the rhythm was off, a discordant note in the otherwise perfect symphony of his solitary life. John sat on his porch, whittling a piece of gnarled mesquite wood, his movements slow and deliberate, his eyes fixed on the distant cemetery. It was a small, fenced-off patch of earth, just a few acres where the sagebrush grew thick and the wind whispered secrets through the few scraggly cedars. His father, Silas, lay buried there, beneath a simple, weathered headstone. A glint of something new, something impossibly out of place, had caught his eye earlier, a tiny anomaly that had pulled him from his morning chores. He'd ridden over on his Baymar, a sense of deep dread already coiling in his stomach, and there it was, a brand new, felt Stetson, sitting perfectly, almost defiantly, on Silas's headstone. It was the 5th year in a row. Always on the same day, the anniversary of Silas's death. Always a different hat, but always a Stetson, precisely placed. "Trouble, John?" came a raspy voice from the doorway, breaking the quiet spell. Old Man Hemlock, his nearest neighbor, and the closest thing John had to family these days, stood there, a steaming coffee cup clutched in his gnarled, age-spotted hand. Hemlock, with his wispy white beard and eyes that had seen more sunrises than most men could count, was a constant, like the mountains themselves. He moved with the slow, deliberate pace of a man who knew the land and its unforgiving ways. John didn't look up, his knife still carving slow. Deliberate curls from the tough wood, the scent of mesquite mingling with the sharp tang of his frustration. The hat Hemlock, it's back. Hemlock sighed, the sound like dry wind through brittle grass, carrying a hint of weary understanding. Still at it, are they? 5 years, is it? He knew. Everyone in this sparse, isolated corner of Texas knew about John's annual torment, the unspoken question that haunted him like a ghost. "You gonna let it get to you again, son? Drive you to distraction?" John finally met his gaze, his blue eyes, usually calm and deep as a still pond, now alight with a simmering, barely contained fury. "Not this year. This year, I'm putting an end to it." He stood, the unfinished mesquite falling forgotten to the porch floor with a soft thud. "I'm gonna wait. Tonight. I'm gonna catch whoever's doing this. I need to know." He rubbed a hand over his jaw, the stubble rough beneath his calloused palm. Hemlock's brow furrowed, a network of wrinkles deepening across his weathered face. "That cemetery's a lonely place at night, John. Miles from any lamp. You sure that's wise? Could be anyone out there." John stared out at the fading light, the setting sun painting the vast sky in hues of fiery orange and deep, mournful purple. A coyote howled in the distance, a long, mournful, echoing sound that seemed to embody the wild, untamed spirit of the land. "I gotta know, Hemlock. It's eating at me. Been eating at me for 5 years now, a thorn in my side. Can't rest until I figure it out." He walked to the edge of the porch, his hand resting on the weathered rail, his knuckles white. The decision was made, hard and unyielding as granite. He wouldn't have let another year pass with this unanswered question hanging over him like a perpetual storm cloud. He'd face the night, face the unknown, and finally get some answers, no matter the cost. The silence of the coming night promised secrets, and John was determined to uncover them. The night descended like a heavy cloak, vast and inky, punctured by a million pinpricks of starlight that shimmered with an almost alien brilliance. John sat hunched behind a gnarled mesquite tree, its thorny branches offering scant cover, his Winchester rifle resting across his lap, its cold steel a reassuring weight. The air was still and cold, carrying the faint, crisp scent of dust and distant creosote bushes, a perfume unique to the desert. Hours crawled by, each minute stretching into an eternity, marked only by the silent passage of the stars and the occasional hoot of a distant owl. His muscles ached from the stillness, his eyes burned from staring into the impenetrable darkness, but he didn't stir. Patience was a cowboy's virtue, forged in long days of waiting for cattle and the slow hand of nature, and tonight he needed every ounce of it. Then, a flicker, a distant light, barely visible, like a firefly on the horizon, moving slowly along the winding, barely there dirt track that led from the main road to the isolated cemetery. John's heart gave a sudden hard jolt against his ribs. This was it. After years of questions, of knowing uncertainty, the moment was finally at hand. He tightened his grip on the rifle, his breath catching in his throat, a cold anticipation coiling in his gut. The light grew steadily, resolving itself into the faint, swinging glow of a lantern held by a figure on horseback. The horse's hooves made soft, rhythmic thuds on the dry earth, a sound that amplified in the vast, almost oppressive silence of the night. The rider dismounted at the cemetery gate, the lantern casting long dancing shadows that stretched and twisted like phantom limbs. John strained his eyes, trying to make out details of the figure. It was tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a quiet confidence that spoke of familiarity with the desolate land, not a tentative step of a trespasser. Definitely not a local he recognized. The stranger walked directly to Silas's grave, the lantern's light illuminating the fresh Stetson on the headstone, its felt material absorbing the light like a dark void. A wave of righteous anger, hot and sharp, washed over John. Who was this person, defiling his father's final resting place year after year? He was about to rise, about to step out and confront them, demand answers, when the stranger knelt. Not to place another hat, as John had expected, but to simply observe. The stranger reached out, not to touch the hat, but to trace the weathered, almost illegible inscription on the headstone with a surprising tenderness. Then, to John's utter surprise, the stranger pulled out a small, worn, leather-bound book from inside his duster and began to read. Aloud, a low, melodic voice carrying clearly on the cool night air the words weaving a strange, haunting spell. Silas, you always said the best stories were told under the open sky, with the stars as your audience and a fire to keep the coyotes at bay. John froze. Stories? What stories? His father hadn't been a man of many words, let alone a teller of grand tales. Silas was a man of quiet labor, a few expressions. A new wave of confusion, cold and unsettling, mingled with his anger. He listened rapt as the stranger continued a vivid tale unfolding about a young Silas full of life and mischief, winning a bull riding competition at a county fair with a broken arm. He'd hidden betting his last dime on a long-shot horse named Dust Devil, and then miraculously winning big enough to buy his first piece of land. John had never heard this story. His father had never mentioned anything of the sort, not a whisper. The stranger chuckled softly, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to carry a lifetime of shared memories. You were a wild one, Silas. Always had a way of finding trouble, and a way out of it too. Always on the edge. John felt a strange pang in his chest. A sense of loss, not of his father to the grave, but of a whole, vibrant part of his father he never knew existed. The anger was still there, a dull throb, but now it was overshadowed by a profound bewilderment. He gripped his rifle tighter, but now it wasn't a weapon of impending confrontation, but a cold, hard anchor against the sudden weight of the unknown. He had lost control of the situation. This wasn't a simple case of vandalism or a morbid prank. It was something far more complicated, far more personal, deeply intertwined with a history he didn't share. And in the vastness of the night, with the stranger's voice weaving intricate tales of a past he didn't share, John felt a sudden, profound sense of being utterly alone, an outsider to his own family's history. The problem hadn't just grown. It had become a living, breathing mystery that clawed at his very understanding of who his father truly was. The stranger, Jeremiah, replaced the Stetson on the grave, a final, tender gesture that spoke of deep, abiding respect. Then he turned to leave, his steps quiet on the gravel path that led back to the cemetery gate, a figure merging with the shadows. John's heart pounded a heavy, erratic rhythm against his ribs. This was it, the moment of truth, the culmination of 5 years of silent torment. He took a deep breath, the cold desert air sharp in his lungs, and stepped out from behind the mesquite, his boots crunching softly on the dry earth. "Hold on." His voice, rough and raspy from hours of silence and the sudden rush of adrenaline, cut through the profound quiet of the night like a drawn knife. The stranger stopped, his hand already on the cold iron of the cemetery gate. He turned slowly, his eyes, dark pools reflecting the moonlight, fixing on John. There was no surprise in them, no startled reaction, only a calm, almost weary acceptance. It was as if he had been expecting this, waiting for it. "Figured you'd show yourself eventually, cowboy," the stranger said, his voice even, without a hint of fear or aggression, just a quiet understanding. "Been watching you too, from a distance. Knew you'd be here tonight." John raised his rifle slightly, not pointing it directly, but making its presence known, its dark barrel catching a sliver of moonlight. It was a silent assertion of his territory, his grief. "Who are you? And why are you doing this? Why are you leaving hats on my father's grave?" His voice was low, laced with a simmering tension he fought desperately to control, a mixture of anger, bewilderment, and a strange, nascent curiosity. The stranger, Jeremiah, leaned against the gate, a faint, almost melancholy smile playing on his lips, a shadow of weariness in his eyes. "Name's Jeremiah, and I'm paying my respects to an old friend, a man who taught me more than anyone ever has." His gaze flickered to Silas's grave, a flicker of something profound passing through his eyes. Silas was more than just a friend, though. He was family. He saved my life, more times than I can count, in ways you wouldn't understand. "Saved your life?" John scoffed, the words sharp, laced with disbelief and a defensive edge. "My father was a rancher, a quiet man. He wasn't some kind of hero. He was just Silas." The image of Silas, the stoic, hard-working rancher who raised him with a stern hand and few words, clashed violently with Jeremiah's claims. It felt like an attack on his reality. Jeremiah's smile faded, replaced by a quiet, unwavering gravity. His eyes held John's, steady and direct. "He was a hero to me. Back in the big drought of '88, when I was just a kid, maybe 10 years old, lost and starving, my folks gone, Silas found me, took me in, taught me how to work the land, how to track, how to break a horse, how to survive in this unforgiving country. He gave me a home when I had none, a roof over my head, and food in my belly when I had nothing but the clothes on my back." He paused, his eyes distant, lost in a memory. "He was more of a father to me than my own ever was. He was the one who taught me to be a man, how to stand on my own 2 feet." The words hit John like a physical blow. a stunning revelation that stole his breath. A foster kid? His father had taken someone in, shared his home, his life, with a stranger? Silas, who rarely showed affection, who kept John at arm's length, who always seemed a fortress of quiet reserve. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, laced with a sharp, unexpected jealousy. Jeremiah, a stranger from Silas's past, had known a side of Silas that John, his own son, had been denied, a depth of compassion he had never witnessed firsthand. Why the hats, then? John demanded, the question raw with unspoken hurt, the deeper ache of feeling overlooked, of a missing piece of his own history. It was a promise, Jeremiah explained, his voice softening, a faraway look in his eyes. A pact we made, back when I finally left to find my own way. We both understood how easy it was to get lost out here, out in the vastness. If either of us ever got lost, truly lost, the other would find them and leave a new hat on their last known grave. A signal, a reminder that they weren't forgotten, even if the world thought they were gone forever. His eyes met John's, holding a profound sadness. Silas knew I'd be back eventually. He was always hopeful I'd find my way back to him, and I did. Too late, maybe, but I still came. A cold, heavy dread seeped into John, chilling him to the bone. But he's gone. He's been gone for 5 years. He's not lost. He's dead. Jeremiah nodded. A single, profound nod. I know. I've been traveling, chasing the sun and rumors, working whatever jobs I could find. When I finally made it back here, found out he was gone, that he passed on, I honored the promise anyway. For him, for the man who taught me everything, who gave me a second chance at life. John felt a desperate surge of despair, a profound sense of disorientation. Everything he thought he knew about his father, about his own family, was crumbling before his eyes, replaced by a sprawling, unfamiliar narrative. The man standing before him, this weathered stranger, held a piece of his father's heart, a connection, a history John had always craved but never found. It was a moment where everything felt utterly lost, his understanding of his legacy, his perception of his father, even the quiet respect he'd always held for the stoic, simple rancher. The silence between them was thick, heavy with unspoken truths and shattered perceptions. Then, a single unexpected tear traced a slow path down Jeremiah's weathered cheek, catching the moonlight like a fragile diamond. A tear not of immediate sorrow, but of profound love and enduring memory. And in that moment, in the vast, silent desert night, something profound shifted within John. A crack in the fortress he had built around his own heart. The tear, a single glistening pearl in the merciless moonlight, spoke volumes. It wasn't a show of weakness. It was a profound testament to the depth and longevity of the bond Jeremiah shared with Silas. John felt the cold metal of the Winchester against his palm, a stark, almost ironic reminder of his initial intent: confrontation, demand, control, now rendered utterly meaningless by the weight of these revelations. He lowered the rifle slowly, deliberately, the soft metallic click of the safety catching the profound silence of the desert night, a sound that seemed to echo in the sudden emptiness of his own understanding. "He never told me," John said, his voice barely a whisper, raw with a pain he hadn't known he carried, a deep-seated ache of feeling left out, unchosen. He felt exposed, vulnerable, stripped bare of his defenses and his carefully constructed image of his family. The familiar solitude of his cowboy life, once a comfort, a reliable companion in the vastness of the land, now felt like a lonely cage, a self-imposed prison. Even in the presence of Jeremiah, a man who offered a glimpse into his father's hidden world, John felt a profound, aching aloneness, the weight of years of unspoken words settling heavily on him. Jeremiah nodded, his gaze distant, fixed on the countless stars that blanketed the sky above, as if finding solace in their ancient, silent wisdom. "Some things are hard to talk about, son. Especially for a man like Silas. He had his reasons. A lot of men from his generation kept things close, tucked away. He paused, drawing a slow, deep breath, then turned his gaze back to John, his eyes holding a depth of understanding. But he loved you, fiercely. There was never any doubt of that. Not for me. He just didn't know how to show it. Not like he showed it to me, maybe, but it was there. In every fence he mended, every acre he worked for you, every piece of knowledge he passed down without a single wasted word. John felt a faint flicker of something he hadn't felt in years, a fragile glimmer of understanding, fragile as a spider's silk, mixed with a renewed, almost exquisite ache. His father's silence hadn't been an absence of love or a mark of indifference, but perhaps a different, more reserved expression of it, one John, in his own youthful expectations, had simply failed to recognize. Jeremiah reached into his worn leather satchel, a piece of his own nomadic life, and pulled out another leather-bound book, identical in its worn appearance to the one he'd been reading from earlier. He kept this for you, said to give it to you if I ever saw you again, if our paths ever crossed. He held it out, a quiet offering in the vast silence. It's his journal, his stories, the ones he couldn't tell you himself, the ones he put to paper when the words wouldn't come out of his mouth. John stared at the book, his hand trembling slightly as he reached for it, his fingers brushing against the soft, aged leather. It was worn, its pages undoubtedly yellowed, familiar yet utterly new, a piece of his father he'd never known existed. He recognized the leather cover, the same rich, dark material as his father's warm Bible, a constant presence on his bedside table. A flash of memory from the first chapter resurfaced with startling clarity, the faint glint of light that had caught his eye from the cemetery earlier today. It hadn't been the Stetson alone that had drawn his attention. It was the way the early morning moonlight had caught the worn leather of this very book, still clutched in Jeremiah's hand as he knelt. It was a beacon, a silent invitation, a last desperate chance to bridge the chasm between him and his father, to finally understand. This was it. A gift profound and unexpected, but also a risk. A risk of further pain, of more unsettling revelations, of a past that might continue to redefine everything he thought he knew, but also a chance for something more. To finally know the man he called father, not just the rancher, not just the provider, but the full, complicated human being. John looked at Jeremiah, his eyes holding a silent question, then at the silent grave of his father, and finally, his gaze settled on the book in his hand. The weight of it was immense, heavier than any burden he'd ever carried, heavier than the sum of all his unanswered questions. With a deep, shuddering breath, he made his choice, his instincts pulling him towards the unknown, towards the unwritten pages of his own family's history. He had to read it. He had to understand. He had to see for himself the man Silas truly was. The path forward was uncertain, but the silence demanded answers, and John, finally, was ready to listen. The sun rose, painting the eastern sky in hues of fiery orange and soft rose, turning the vast expanse of the desert into a canvas of shifting light. But John was oblivious to its beauty. He sat by Silas's grave, cross-legged, the leather-bound journal open on his lap, the first resolute rays of dawn illuminating the cramped, familiar handwriting of his father. Jeremiah had left hours ago, a quiet nod, a shared understanding passing between them that transcended words. Now it was just John, the Stetson on the headstone, and the living, breathing words of his father. He read through the morning, the stories unfolding like a slow, deliberate river, carving new channels in the landscape of his understanding. Tales of loneliness, of a boy who left home young, chasing a restless dream he couldn't quite name, always seeking something just beyond the horizon. Stories of hardships, of close calls and narrow escapes, of lean years and hard-won victories. And then, subtly, the entries began to shift. Entries about a young, wild kid named Jeremiah, found alone and vulnerable, taken in from the harsh road. Silas wrote of his struggles to connect, to teach, to nurture, of the unexpected fear of failing this boy who had nothing. But beneath the gruff, often brief words, John saw it. The burgeoning, undeniable love, the quiet pride in Jeremiah's resilience, his quick wit, his fierce loyalty. And then, surprisingly, entries about John. His birth, chronicled with a rare flourish of emotion. His first unsteady steps across the ranch yard. His quiet nature, a reflection, Silas seemed to observe, of himself. Silas, in his own reserved way, had chronicled his fears of not being a good enough father, of not knowing how to express the deep affection he felt of the vast chasm that often seemed to separate them, despite their shared blood and shared land. A specific entry caught John's eye, dated just weeks before Silas's death, almost a final confession. John is a good boy, strong, like his mother. He'll make a fine man, a fine rancher. I pray he finds what he needs in this world, finds his own peace. My only regret, that I never told him all I should have. The words never came easy for me, but the love, that was always there, son, always, more than you'll ever know. Tears, hot and unexpected, streamed down John's weathered face, carving clean paths through the dust. Not tears of sorrow for Silas's passing, but tears of a profound, liberating release. The silence, the emotional distance, the perceived lack of affection, it hadn't been a void, a testament to indifference, but a complex, unspoken language that John, in his own youthful expectations and grief, had simply failed to understand. Silas had loved him deeply, truly, fiercely. He had just expressed it in the only way he knew how, through his quiet, tireless work, his steadfast, unwavering presence, and through the secret stories and profound confessions he entrusted to his leather-bound journal. John closed the book, his fingers tracing the worn, familiar leather. The Stetson still sat squarely on the headstone, a silent sentinel, a symbol now not of mystery or intrusion, but of a bond that transcended death, a bridge built between the living and the gone. He had come here seeking answers about a hat, about a strange ritual, and found a truth far grander, far more encompassing. His father wasn't just the stoic man he knew. He was a complex tapestry of hidden adventures, quiet compassion, deep regrets, and unwavering, if unspoken, love. He stood, stretching his stiff limbs, the first full light of a new day warming his face, chasing away the last vestiges of night's chill. The ranch would still be there. The cattle would still need tending, the fences mending, but nothing would be exactly the same. John was transformed. He carried the weight of his father's past, but now it was a comforting weight, a cherished legacy of love and untold stories, a part of him now. He looked at the vast, open sky, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips, the same kind of smile he now imagined on his father's younger face. He was still a cowboy, still tied to the land and its rhythms, but now his soul felt lighter, his heart fuller, cleansed by understanding. The journey to uncover the secret of the hat had ended, but a new one, filled with the echoes of his father's silent love, had just begun. He whispered into the crisp morning breeze a single clear thought. "I understand, Pa. Finally."